I was expecting a warm Thanksgiving, but my family excluded me. Reddit storytelling. Welcome to Silent Wars. In today's Reddit storytelling video, we dive into a heartfelt and emotional tale of family conflict and personal boundaries. This Reddit storytelling story takes you through the highs and lows of relationships, betrayal, and self-discovery. As we explore this powerful narrative, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Silent Wars for more amazing Reddit storytelling content. Join us for more stories that touch your heart and make you reflect on life. Thanksgiving has always been one of my favorite holidays. It wasn't just about the food, although that certainly played a big part in it. For me, the real joy came from the tradition itself. Every year, my mom would host the family dinner, and despite the occasional chaos of organizing such a big event, there was always this warm, comforting feeling that filled the house. The smell of turkey in the oven, the sound of laughter echoing through the rooms, the clinking of silverware as everyone gathered around the table. It was these small details that made me feel safe, loved, and connected to my family. Thanksgiving had always been a time for us to come together, share memories, and celebrate the things we were grateful for. But this year, everything felt different. I didn't even realize how much I had been looking forward to this Thanksgiving until the morning of. I had been buried in work for the past few weeks, and the thought of finally spending time with my family seemed like the perfect escape from all the stress. The idea of sitting around the table with my siblings, joking around and indulging in too much food, was enough to lift my spirits. I texted my mom to confirm the time. She told me 4 p.m., and I was thrilled. It was the perfect time to get a few things done before heading over to her house. I rushed through my errands, checked the clock. It was 3:45 p.m., and it looked like I was right on schedule. As I drove toward my parents' house, I found myself reflecting on previous Thanksgivings, replaying fond memories in my head. The thought of seeing everyone again, the familiar faces, the familiar comfort of family traditions, filled me with warmth. But as I neared the house, I couldn't shake this nagging feeling that something wasn't right. I brushed it off as nerves, or maybe the leftover stress from work, but deep down, I felt uneasy. When I pulled up to the house, the usual comforting sight of cars lined up in the driveway was missing. There were no familiar faces rushing to greet me, no sound of activity coming from inside the house. I stood there for a moment, confused, then walked up to the front door, thinking maybe I was the first one to arrive. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I knocked a few times, still nothing. At this point, my heart began to race. Where was everyone? I pulled out my phone to send a quick text, but before I could type anything, it buzzed. It was a message from my mom. "We thought you'd be late." My mind went blank. I reread the message twice, trying to make sense of it. What did she mean? Before I could figure it out, another message popped up, this time from my sister. "We couldn't keep waiting." My stomach dropped. It didn't make sense. Thanksgiving wasn't just about the food, it was about the family, about us all being together. We always waited for everyone to arrive before sitting down to eat. Why hadn't they waited for me? Why didn't they even bother to call and check if I was okay? The feeling of being disregarded, the realization that my family had moved on without me, hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just about missing the meal, it was about feeling invisible, like I didn't matter to them anymore. I opened the door and stepped inside. The house was eerily silent. On the table, there was a half-eaten turkey, a few scattered plates, and some half-finished side dishes. It was clear that they had already eaten. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the remnants of what should have been our meal. I felt a bitter sting in my chest. How could they have started without me? The disappointment was overwhelming, and I turned and walked out without saying a word. As I left, I couldn't help but wonder, why hadn't they waited? Why didn't they care enough to check if I was on my way? Thanksgiving had always been a cherished family tradition, a time when we could gather together, enjoy a hearty meal, and celebrate the bonds we shared. Every year, my mom would host the family dinner, and despite the occasional chaos that came with preparing such a big event, there was something truly special about it. The laughter, the smells of turkey and mashed potatoes, and the sound of clinking silverware, it was all a part of what made Thanksgiving so meaningful. It was a time for family to come together and for everyone to feel loved, safe, and connected. However, this year felt different. I didn't realize how much I had been looking forward to this particular Thanksgiving until the morning of. My work had kept me busy for weeks, and the idea of finally spending time with family felt like the perfect escape from the stress. I texted my mom early in the morning to confirm the time, and she replied that dinner would be at 4 p.m. I was excited. I had planned everything perfectly, aiming to get a few errands done before heading over to her place. By the time 3:45 p.m. came around, I was finishing up, and I headed to the house. As I drove, I thought back to previous years, relishing the memories of Thanksgiving dinners past. The familiar feeling of anticipation and joy filled me, and I couldn't wait to see everyone again. But as I pulled up to my parents' house, something felt off. The usual line of cars was missing, the driveway was empty, and there was no one waiting outside, no sign of the usual hustle and bustle. I stood there for a moment, feeling confused, but shrugged it off, thinking I might just be early. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. My heart began to race, and I couldn't shake the sense of unease building inside me. Where was everyone? Just as I was about to send a text, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my mom, but it made no sense. "We thought you'd be late," she wrote. I stood there staring at the message, trying to make sense of it. Before I could process it, another text came in, this time from my sister. "We couldn't keep waiting." My stomach sank. What did she mean by that? Thanksgiving was always about everyone being together, no matter the time. We never ate without each other. I felt a deep pang of confusion and hurt. I opened the door and walked inside. The house, which should have been filled with warmth and the sounds of family, was eerily quiet. There, on the table, sat a half-eaten turkey and scattered side dishes. It was clear that they had already eaten. The thought that my family had moved on without me, that they had gone ahead and started the meal without so much as a call to check if I was coming, hit me like a ton of bricks. I stood frozen, staring at the remnants of what should have been our shared meal. How could they have started without me? Why didn't they at least check if I was running late? My disappointment was overwhelming, and without saying a word, I turned and walked out of the house. The cold air hit me as I stepped outside, but the chill I felt inside was far greater. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed to get away, to clear my head. The hurt lingered as I drove aimlessly. Thanksgiving wasn't just about the meal for me, it was about the people, the connection, and the togetherness. But that day, I felt invisible, like I didn't matter enough for anyone to wait. I couldn't shake the question that lingered in my mind. Why didn't they wait? Thanksgiving had always been one of those holidays that I treasured. It wasn't just about the delicious food, though, that was certainly a big part of it. Thanksgiving was about family, tradition, and the warm atmosphere that filled my childhood home. Every year, my mom would host the dinner, and despite the occasional chaos that came with cooking for a big group, there was always something comforting and familiar about it. The laughter around the table, the clinking of silverware, the sounds of people telling stories, it was a time when I felt safe, loved, and connected to those I cared about. This year, however, things felt off from the moment I woke up. I didn't realize how much I was looking forward to being with family until that morning. My work had been overwhelming, and the thought of sitting down with my siblings and catching up over a good meal seemed like the perfect way to unwind. I texted my mom to check when I should come by, and she replied quickly 4 p.m., just like every year. I was eager, perhaps overly so, rushing through my errands to make sure I would arrive on time. By 3:45 p.m., I finished up and headed over to my parents' house, replaying past Thanksgivings in my head with a smile on my face. But as I pulled up to the house, a nagging feeling started to grow. There were no cars parked outside, no sign of the usual hustle and bustle. It was strange, as my family always arrived early, preparing the food and getting the house ready. I figured I might have arrived too early, so I rang the doorbell, expecting to hear the sounds of people inside. When no one answered, I knocked. A little louder this time. Still nothing. My heart started to race. What was going on? Before I could send a text to my mom to ask if something was wrong, I received a message from her. "We thought you'd be late." I froze, rereading the message twice, trying to understand. It didn't make sense. Then, another message popped up, this time from my sister. "We couldn't keep waiting." My stomach dropped, and my confusion deepened. Thanksgiving had always been about being together. My family never ate without each other. They always waited for everyone to arrive. Why had they started without me? I walked into the house hoping maybe they were just running late with the food. But as I entered, I was greeted by an eerie silence. The table was set, but the food was already half-eaten. The turkey and side dishes were already scattered around the table, evidence that they had eaten without me. The emptiness in the room hit me hard. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at what should have been a shared meal. My heart pounded in my chest. How could they have done this? Why didn't they call me? Why didn't they even wait? The overwhelming feeling of being left out and disregarded hit me like a punch to the gut. Without saying a word, I turned on my heel and walked out. I didn't want to be there anymore, and I certainly didn't want to confront anyone. I drove aimlessly, trying to process what had just happened. I ended up at a park, sitting on a bench in the cold, trying to figure out how I felt. Thanksgiving wasn't just about food, it was about connection, warmth, and family. But on this day, it felt like they had moved on without me. I was an afterthought. As I sat there, I couldn't help but wonder why they didn't wait. Why didn't they care enough to check if I was okay? My family had always been there for each other, or so I thought. But today, I felt abandoned. I felt like I didn't matter, and it stung more than I expected. The silence in the park gave me some peace, but it also made the hurt feel heavier. Why hadn't they waited for me? Thanksgiving had always been a time of connection for me, a time when the chaos of life slowed down and the warmth of family took center stage. I looked forward to it every year, and it was a tradition I cherished deeply. There was something magical about the smell of turkey roasting in the oven, the laughter of my siblings, and the lively chatter around the table. Thanksgiving was not just about food, it was about the love, the memories, and the feeling of being surrounded by family, no matter how imperfect we might be. This year, however, things felt different. I had been working long hours leading up to the holiday, and the thought of finally being with my family was enough to lift my spirits. The idea of spending time with my siblings, indulging in too much food, and sharing stories was exactly what I needed to unwind. So, when I texted my mom to ask what time I should come by, I was excited, eager to join them for the familiar traditions. My mom responded promptly, telling me to arrive at 4 p.m. Everything seemed perfect. I rushed through my errands, excited for the time together. But when I arrived at the house, something felt wrong. The familiar sight of cars parked in front of the house wasn't there. My family always arrived early, helping my mom get everything ready. As I stood outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When I rang the doorbell, there was no answer. I knocked again, a little louder this time, but still nothing. The knot in my stomach grew tighter. Why was no one answering? I pulled out my phone to text my mom, but before I could, I received a message from her. "We thought you'd be late." I stared at the message, confused. What did she mean by that? Before I could even process the message, another one came through from my sister. "We couldn't keep waiting." My stomach sank. This wasn't like them. Thanksgiving was always about waiting for everyone to arrive. It was supposed to be about being together, not about rushing ahead without me. I opened the door, hoping to find the familiar sight of my family bustling around, but instead, the house was eerily quiet. The table was set, but half the food was already gone. The turkey, the mashed potatoes, and the side dishes, all of it was already half-eaten. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the remnants of what was supposed to be our shared meal. A cold wave of betrayal hit me. I didn't even know what to feel. Hurt, disappointment, anger, it all washed over me in an instant. How could they have started without me? The emotions overwhelmed me. I didn't say a word. I turned on my heel and walked out, not wanting to stay in a place where I was so easily forgotten. I drove aimlessly, unsure of where to go or what to do. Thanksgiving wasn't just about the food, it was about family. And now it felt like my family had moved on without me, leaving me behind in a way I never expected. I ended up at a park, sitting on a bench in the cold, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My phone buzzed, but I couldn't bring myself to look at the messages. I didn't want to hear their excuses or their apologies. What was the point? They had made it clear that I wasn't a priority to them. Thanksgiving was supposed to be a time of warmth and togetherness, but this year it had become a symbol of how little I mattered to them. I couldn't understand how they could move on without me so easily. Thanksgiving has always held a special place in my heart. It was more than just a holiday. It was a tradition that brought my family together each year. The smell of turkey filling the house, the sound of laughter echoing from the kitchen, and the warmth of being surrounded by loved ones made the day feel magical. For me, Thanksgiving was synonymous with family, connection, and shared memories. It was the one time of year when we all gathered around the table to celebrate not only the food, but also each other. However, this year, everything felt off from the moment I woke up. The anticipation I had built up over the weeks leading to Thanksgiving quickly turned to confusion and frustration. I had been swamped with work and responsibilities, but I had looked forward to the chance to finally escape the stress and spend time with my family. The thought of sitting down to dinner, sharing stories, and joking with my siblings made everything seem right again. I thought I was walking into a familiar, comforting tradition, but that wasn't the case. I texted my mom earlier in the day, asking what time I should come by. We always had a set time, and I didn't want to miss out on any part of the day. Her response was quick. 4 p.m. is great. See you then. I was excited. I rushed through my errands, making sure to arrive just in time. As I drove, I couldn't shake a nagging feeling in the back of my mind, but I pushed it aside. Surely everything would be just as it always had been. But when I arrived at the house, I felt a deep sense of confusion. The usual crowd of cars wasn't there. My family was always early, getting everything ready for dinner. There was no sign of anyone outside, no chatter, no bustling activity. I stood there, confused, before ringing the doorbell. I knocked a few times, but still, no one answered. My heart started to race. Where was everyone? It wasn't until I pulled out my phone to text my mom that I got the first clue. "We thought you'd be late," she said. I reread the message, unsure of what she meant. Before I could figure it out, another text came through. "We couldn't keep waiting." My stomach dropped. Thanksgiving had always been about waiting for everyone to arrive. My family wouldn't start the meal without me. Would they? I pushed open the door, and that's when the reality hit me. The house was eerily silent, and the table was half empty. The turkey, the side dishes, the dessert, It was all there, but half-eaten. I stood frozen, staring at the remnants of what should have been our shared meal. The family that I had always counted on, the people I thought I could rely on, had moved on without me. The realization was overwhelming. I hadn't just missed the food. I had missed out on being part of something important. It wasn't just the meal that mattered, it was the connection, the togetherness, the shared moment. And they had just gone ahead without me, without even checking to see if I was coming. The hurt and frustration welled up inside of me, but I refused to let it show. I turned on my heel and left without a word. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get away. I drove aimlessly, looking for a place to think, to escape the confusion and the pain that had started to sink in. I ended up at a park, sitting on a bench, staring at the sky. Thanksgiving, a day meant for love and connection, had become a symbol of my family's indifference. I couldn't understand why they hadn't waited, why they hadn't cared enough to call me or check if I was on my way. My phone buzzed with texts and calls, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I didn't want to hear their explanations or their excuses. How could they have done this to me? How could they just move on without a second thought? As I sat there, the weight of it all started to sink in. It wasn't just the food I had missed, it was the betrayal, the feeling of being forgotten. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't just upset about Thanksgiving. I was upset about how I had been treated over the years. Always the afterthought, always the one who had to make compromises. But this time, I wasn't going to let it go. I couldn't say if this would be the end of it or if things would ever be the same again. But for once, I knew that I needed to take control. It was time to stop being the person who always forgave, always gave in. I wasn't going to let them get away with making me feel invisible anymore. And as the sun set that night, I felt a strange sense of peace. The family I had once believed in had let me down, but now I had to let them go. Thanksgiving had always been my favorite holiday. It wasn't just about the food, though, that was certainly a big part of it, but more about the sense of tradition and togetherness. Every year, my mom hosted the family dinner, and despite the chaos that sometimes came with organizing everything, there was always this warm, welcoming feeling in the house. The smells, the laughter, the clinking of silverware, it was a time when we felt safe, loved, and connected. However, this year, something felt different from the very start. I hadn't realized just how much I was looking forward to this Thanksgiving until the morning of. The past few weeks had been filled with work stress, and I was eagerly anticipating the opportunity to escape it and spend time with family. The thought of sitting around the table with my siblings, sharing jokes, and indulging in too much food was enough to lift my spirits. I couldn't wait to finally relax and reconnect. I texted my mom early in the day to ask what time I should come over. She quickly replied, 4 p.m. is great. See you then. I was excited and started preparing for the day, rushing through errands so I could make it to my parents' house just in time. As I drove over, I kept replaying the previous year's Thanksgiving in my head, the memories of laughter and togetherness. But as I neared my parents' house, something started to feel off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the nagging feeling didn't go away. When I arrived at the house, I immediately noticed that something was wrong. There were no cars parked in front of the house. This was odd. My family always arrived early to help with the preparations, and the driveway was usually bustling with activity. I stood there for a moment, confused, and then walked toward the front door. I rang the doorbell and knocked, but there was no answer. At this point, my heart began to race, and my stomach twisted in a knot. Where was everyone? I pulled out my phone to text my mom, but before I could type anything, I received a message from her. "We thought you'd be late." I blinked, rereading the message. What did she mean by that? Then came another message from my sister. "We couldn't keep waiting." My stomach dropped as the realization hit me I had been left out. They didn't wait for me. This wasn't just about missing the meal, it was the fact that my family had gone ahead without me. I felt a sharp, bitter sting of rejection. I walked inside, hoping for some explanation, but the house was eerily quiet. The dinner table was half empty, with only a few remnants of what should have been our shared Thanksgiving feast. The turkey, the side dishes, everything was half-eaten. I stood there, frozen, staring at the empty spaces where my family should have been, where I should have been. The thought that they had just moved on without me, without even checking to see if I was on my way, was unbearable. I left the house without a word, the weight of it all settling in as I walked back to my car. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I needed to get away from the house, from them, from everything. I drove aimlessly, needing space to think. Eventually, I parked at a quiet park, sitting on a bench, staring blankly ahead. Thanksgiving, a day meant for togetherness and warmth, had been reduced to this feeling of abandonment. I had always been there for them, and yet, they hadn't waited for me. Why? I sat there for a long time, letting the cold air seep into my thoughts. I didn't want to talk to them, not after this. But then, my phone buzzed again, my mom's text asking if we could talk. After everything, I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear her explanation. The hurt was still too fresh, and I wasn't ready to forgive just yet. The silence between us was deafening. It wasn't just about Thanksgiving. It was about the years of being taken for granted, of always being the one who had to compromise. This year, they had crossed a line. The family I had always loved and been there for had left me behind, and I wasn't sure if I could ever go back to what it once was. Thanksgiving had always been a time of connection, warmth, and family tradition. As a child, I looked forward to it all year, the smell of turkey in the oven, the chatter around the table, the feeling of being surrounded by loved ones. It was a celebration of togetherness, a reminder that no matter the struggles we faced, we could always count on each other. But this year, it felt different. And I didn't even realize how much until it was too late. For weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, I had been working non-stop. The stress from work had taken a toll, and the idea of a holiday spent with family was the perfect escape I had been craving. I envisioned the usual gathering at my parents' house, the laughter, the chaos, the plates piled high with food, and the camaraderie we always shared. I texted my mom in the morning to confirm the time, and she replied promptly, "4 p.m. is great. See you then." Perfect, I thought. I finished my errands and got ready to head over. However, when I arrived at the house, something felt off. There were no cars parked outside. This was strange. My family always arrived early, and the driveway was typically full of vehicles. I stood in confusion for a moment before walking up to the front door. I rang the doorbell, then knocked louder, but there was no answer. My stomach started to churn as a wave of anxiety washed over me. Where was everyone? I pulled out my phone to text my mom, but before I could type anything, I received a message from her. "We thought you'd be late." I blinked, trying to process it. What did she mean by that? Then another message came through from my sister. "We couldn't keep waiting." My heart sank. The realization hit me hard they had already started without me. I stood there, frozen, feeling the sting of being left out, of not even being considered. I opened the door and stepped inside, hoping for an explanation. But what I found left me speechless. The dining table was almost empty, with only half-eaten food scattered across it. The warm, bustling atmosphere I had expected was replaced with an eerie silence. It was clear they had eaten without me. The thought that my family had just gone ahead with dinner, without a second thought, made my chest tighten. This wasn't just about missing a meal, it was about being treated like I didn't matter. I walked back to my car without a word. The weight of the situation settled in, and I found myself questioning everything. Why didn't they wait for me? Why hadn't they at least checked to see if I was on my way? I drove aimlessly, not knowing where to go, just needing to escape. I ended up at a park, sitting alone on a bench, trying to process the hurt I was feeling. Thanksgiving, a day meant to bring families together, had been completely overshadowed by the feeling of abandonment. As I sat there, my phone buzzed again, my mom texting me. "Can we talk? We didn't mean to hurt you." But the words felt hollow. The damage had already been done, and the silence between us was deafening. I didn't know if I was ready to face them, let alone forgive them. The thought that they had moved on without me, so easily, made me question whether I would ever be able to return to the family dynamic we once had. This Thanksgiving wasn't just about missing dinner, it was about feeling invisible in my own family, and I wasn't sure if I could ever find my way back. Thanksgiving has always held a special place in my heart. It's the time of year when family comes together, when the hustle and bustle of life pauses for a moment to let us reconnect. Every year, my mom would host, and the house would be filled with the sounds of laughter, clinking silverware, and the warm smells of turkey, stuffing, and mashed potatoes. No matter what life threw at us, Thanksgiving was a constant reminder of the bond we shared as a family. But this year, everything was different. I didn't even realize how much I had been looking forward to it until the day of. The stress of work had been weighing heavily on me, and the thought of spending a few hours with family felt like the perfect escape. I was excited to laugh with my siblings, indulge in too much food, and enjoy the comfort of being with those I loved. I texted my mom that morning, asking what time I should come by. She quickly responded, "4 p.m. is perfect. See you then." I rushed through my errands and checked the time, 3:45 p.m. I was right on schedule. I drove to my parents' house, replaying the memories of previous Thanksgiving dinners in my head. But as I pulled up to the house, something felt off. There were no cars parked in the driveway. I couldn't recall a time when our family wasn't early, getting the food ready and gathering in excitement. Confused, I walked to the front door and rang the doorbell, knocking a few times. No answer. My heart began to race. I pulled out my phone to send a text, but before I could type anything, I received a message from my mom. "We thought you'd be late." My mind went blank as I reread the message. What did she mean by that? Another message came through from my sister. "We couldn't keep waiting." My stomach dropped. They had already started without me. I opened the door and stepped inside, expecting to hear the usual chatter. But instead, the house was eerily quiet. The dining table was half empty, with only a few remnants of the meal left behind. It was clear they had already eaten. The thought that my family had gone ahead without me, without even checking if I was on my way, hit me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just about the food, it was about being left out, being ignored in my own family. I walked back outside, my emotions swirling. The anger and confusion were too much to handle, but I kept it bottled up. I didn't even want to confront them. I got in my car, started the engine, and just drove. I had no destination in mind, just the need to escape. I ended up at a park, sitting alone, trying to clear my head. But nothing could shake the feeling of being disregarded, of being unimportant. As I sat there, my phone buzzed again, a message from my mom. "Can we talk? We didn't mean to hurt you." But the words didn't offer any comfort. How could they not have realized how much it hurt? How easily they had moved on without me? I didn't know what to say, and I wasn't sure I wanted to hear their excuses. The Thanksgiving I had always looked forward to had turned into a painful reminder of how little I mattered. The silence between us grew louder. I didn't know if I could ever forgive them, or if I wanted to. For the first time in my life, I realized that sometimes the best way to heal is to walk away from the people who don't value you. Thanksgiving had always been one of my favorite holidays. It wasn't just about the turkey and the mashed potatoes, though those certainly played a big part. It was about tradition. Every year, without fail, my mom would host the family dinner, and despite the chaos that often came with it, preparing food, dealing with last-minute guest arrivals, and making sure everyone had enough to drink there, was always this warm, comforting feeling that filled the house. It was a time of laughter, love, and connection, and I always looked forward to it. This year, however, something was different. I had been working nonstop for weeks, drowning in stress, so the idea of spending a day with family felt like the perfect escape. The thought of sitting around the dinner table, joking with my siblings, and indulging in all the food was enough to lift my spirits. I texted my mom that morning, asking what time I should come by. 4 p.m. works great. See you then, she replied. It was the confirmation I needed, and I was excited. But when I pulled up to the house at 3:55 p.m., something immediately felt off. There were no cars parked outside, and no sign of life coming from the house. My family always arrived early to get things ready, to mingle and prep the food. Confused, I rang the doorbell. No answer. I knocked louder this time, still nothing. My stomach began to twist. I pulled out my phone to send a quick text, but before I could type anything, I got a message from my mom. "We thought you'd be late." I was caught off guard. What did she mean? Another text came through, this time from my sister. "We couldn't keep waiting." My heart dropped. What? They had already eaten? Thanksgiving wasn't just about the food, it was about us being together as a family. How could they go ahead without me? Why didn't they even check if I was on my way? I opened the door to find the house eerily quiet. The table was half empty, with only scraps of food left behind. The thought that my family had gone ahead without me, without so much as a phone call, hit me like a ton of bricks. I was devastated. I stood frozen in the doorway, the weight of their disregard crushing me. Without saying a word, I turned and left. I couldn't handle the overwhelming disappointment. I didn't even know what to say to them. I just wanted to get away. I drove aimlessly, eventually parking at a park, trying to find some peace. I sat on a bench in silence, my mind racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been completely overlooked, discarded by the very people who were supposed to care about me. As I sat there, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from my mom. "Please come back. We didn't mean to hurt you." I stared at the message, confused and hurt. The thought that they didn't even think to check on me before starting the meal was painful. This wasn't just about dinner, it was about the complete lack of respect and consideration. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to forgive them, to let it go, but another part of me knew that I deserved more. I wasn't going to let them take me for granted anymore. When I got home later, I threw my keys on the counter and collapsed onto the couch, feeling empty. My phone buzzed again, another message from my mom, another attempt to make things right. But it was too little, too late. The days that followed were eerily quiet. They didn't reach out as much. And when they did, it felt more like an obligation than a genuine attempt to fix what had been broken. I realized that maybe this wasn't about Thanksgiving at all. Maybe it was about me finally realizing that I was worth more than being treated like an afterthought. Link in life, we often find ourselves caught in situations where we give and give, expecting that those we care about will reciprocate. However, sometimes the reality is different. This story highlights an important lesson about self-worth and the value of mutual respect in relationships. Just as the protagonist learned to stand up for themselves when their family took them for granted, we, too, must recognize when it's time to set boundaries. It's not about being selfish, but about taking care of ourselves so that we can give from a place of strength rather than depletion. The truth is, As we age, it becomes even more important to prioritize our own well-being, emotionally and physically. Relationships should bring comfort, not pain, and it's essential to remember that it's okay to walk away from situations where we're not valued. We shouldn't be afraid to speak up and protect our peace. Sometimes, real love and respect come when we show others that we value ourselves first. This lesson is a reminder that our worth is not determined by what we do for others, but by how we treat ourselves and the healthy boundaries we create to maintain our dignity and happiness. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this Reddit storytelling journey. If you liked the video, make sure to hit like and subscribe to Silent Wars so you never miss another heartfelt story. Your support helps us bring more stories that make a difference. See you in the next video.